Happy you came to join us this afternoon for our special session. This afternoon will be a special treat. We will be celebrating superheroes who have overcome domestic violence to break the silence and make a change. It is time to stop domestic violence, and it starts with us. Here's your host and co-host.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Welcome to our October I Am series, Women's Empowerment Session. Come on, you know how we like to do it. Let us know you're out there.
Mm-hmm. Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday. Oh, what's my song? Happy Friday to you. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday.
Okay, that's the singer on that side.
I'm sorry.
That's the singer on. So welcome. If this is your first time, we want to welcome you. Definitely, if it's not your first time, welcome back. If you've missed some sessions, you can always see them on YouTube under Lioness Queen. You can subscribe. Let us know how you are enjoying our sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so we are so excited today because we are celebrating some superheroes.
Yes.
And I can say the devil tried it, but they still here.
Yeah.
And it gives me goosebumps just to say that. The devil tried it, but they are still here. And just like you and me, the devil tried it, but we are still here. Honest Queen is not going to go off on a tangent. I'm not going to, because when you think about the goodness.
Yeah, come on now.
Think about it.
Yeah.
It's still here. Through COVID, you're still here. Through these past 4 years of foolery, you are still here. And so let's get back. Let me get back. Let me get centered. Okay. But I'm telling you what, we are so excited today to celebrate these superheroes who have overcome domestic violence and overcome being in an abusive relationship. And, right now we want to share hope to people who may not know what to do, where to go. And so we just want to provide that platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we bring our guests on, we also want to let you know that next month we're going to have another special episode where we're going to be decorating for the holidays. Now,
yay!
Yeah, I'm so excited. Like, I'm not having a lot of people over, but why not decorate for me?
Yeah.
Enjoy my abode in a way where, every time I go to the kitchen, every time I go to the dining room or wherever, the bathroom, however you want to. So we want to provide some different type of decorations that you can maybe use at home. And so we'll be doing that next month. So stay tuned. And then also I wanted to share that I have 2 exciting things coming out. I actually have a writing journal and a guided journal. And the guided journal is to help people who have overcome rejection. And so it helps you to work on that residue that still may be there in order to move forward into where God wants you to be. So stay tuned. You definitely can find out more information on any of my social media pages on Lioness Queen and also on YouTube. So I'm very excited about that. So stay tuned.
Well, that would be really nice to have around Christmas time. No pressure, you know what I'm saying? But
so hopefully we can launch in December. Hopefully. So just stay tuned. I'm excited about that. So, Reverend Sherry, what are you drinking over there?
So today I am drinking an orange spice herbal tea with honey. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking ginger tea, ginger honey. Yeah, ginger and honey. All right. So before we bring on our guests, I mean, I'm telling you, this time has been really, really challenging with COVID, and domestic violence has been on the rise and all over the world, not just in
Mhm.
America, but all over the world. And actually, what's interesting, the Washington Post talked about how
Mhm.
the numbers aren't high in the US, but they're saying that because it's not being reported.
Mm.
They're not getting the help that they need. And if you think about even with children, children can't even make reports because they're not in school.
Yeah.
However, the one thing that is on the rise is the murder suicide.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
where the male partner kills the female and then himself, and that is unfortunately on
Right.
the rise. And so we want to, always provide the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is actually scrolling on the bottom of the screen for anyone who may need it. And so please text um, love is to the number 2252 if you ever feel you need help. And then we also provided a crisis line as well. And so if you ever feel like you're in crisis, you can feel free to also text the word home to the number 741-741. All right, Reverend Sherry. So let's go ahead and bring on our guests. And
Awesome.
I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
All righty. So, it's an honor to be able to introduce these amazing superheroes tonight. We have two in the house, Helga Lust and Hampton E. Conway. And so I'm going to read a little bit about the both of them. Helga works at Manhattan Strategy Group as the Director of Information and Communications. At this government consulting firm, she leads federal efforts on an array of social issues, including violence prevention, trauma, and mental health. She has worked in public interest, public relations, and health communications, providing strategic counsel and communication support over the past 30 years. In 2018, she co-authored the Trauma-Informed Care Resolutions that passed unanimously through the House, U.S. House, and Senate. Also in 2018, she ran for Maryland State Delegate. And although not advancing from the primary election, Helga remains very engaged in community efforts and advocates to address climate change and promote trauma-informed approaches. She is an expert on behavioral health issues, social behavior, change communication, violence and bullying prevention, child abuse and neglect, family and domestic violence, and trauma-informed support. In 2011, she was awarded the Congressional Unsung Hero Award for her effective advocacy work on violence prevention and response. Her passion for this work stems from her work with survivors to turn the dark cloud of violence into positive social change, something she's learned from her own experience as a survivor of attempted murder and domestic abuse. The criminal justice process of the violence she experienced became a forensic files episode, as her case was one of the first in the United States to be tried with dental pathology as critical evidence. Outside of work, Helga facilitates a community art collaboration that is proving to build personal and community resilience. And she is a distance runner who is training for her 17th marathon. And she is the mother of teenage twins and has 3 rescued dogs. May I present Miss Helga Lust to you all tonight. And then, hey, Helga.
Hey, thank you so much.
You're welcome, 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 welcome.
Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. Glad to have you. Our next guest is Hampton E. Conway. Hampton E. Conway III is an instructional technology specialist for Prince George's County Schools. He has been a teacher and principal during his over 20 years in education. Drawing from his own experience as a battered husband and a father of 10 children who endured abuse, Hampton is passionate about empowering others to effectively deal with all forms of domestic violence. Hampton has been trained by Faith Trust Institute and is actively working to address domestic violence throughout the DMV. He also is a member of the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, Interfaith Fellowship Ministries, Interfaith Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and SAFE, Stop Abuse for Everyone. He has also volunteered with Prison Fellowship Ministries, run mentoring programs, and volunteered and mentored at juvenile detention centers. Hampton strives to provide hope and help to those that are in need. So may we introduce to you Mr. Hampton E. Conway III. Hey, Hampton.
Hey.
Hey, we're super excited about having you on as well.
Glad to be
Welcome.
here. Thank you.
Welcome. Reverend Dr. Linus Queen.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I want to say first, we salute you and we thank you for coming on the I Am Series Women's Empowerment Session. We are honored to hear from survivors who, what I would like to say, have spread their wings and made the jump to live.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to get started. I know this is going to be challenging because we are limited with time. And you have so much to tell. And so I know it's just going to be challenging, but we're going to try to get through it the best way that we can. And so the first thing that I kind of wanted to go through is your story, but kind of in a way that it can be kind of presented where we hear what you went through in a brief way. And so my first question to the both of you, and I'll start with Helga first. So one, who was your abuser? And so who was your abuser? How long was the abuse? And what are 7 words or adjectives that you could use to describe the abuse?
So thank you so much for inviting me to be on this show and for focusing on such a critical topic now, maybe more than ever, with rising numbers and lower reports. My abuser was my now ex-husband, and the abuse was going on since 1999, since I met him. Only before I married him, I didn't really recognize the warning signs of abuse that I then started to feel in a very different way once we were married and living together. He was never not an addict or never not abusive. His nature was always that way. And I married him anyway, even with my best friend, Joe, walked me down the aisle in place of my deceased father. And he said, "Are you really sure you want to do this?" I saw the red flags, but I married him anyway. So 7 words that describe my experience with him: exhausting, demoralizing, dehumanizing, isolating, destructive, sort of like consistent and predictable, and then grave. And I use the last word, grave, because he made it impossible for me to be the kind of mother that I always dreamed of being. He made it absolutely impossible for me to be everything I could have been for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Mr. Conway?
I feel like I could just change around what Helga said and just apply it to myself. But it was my ex-wife, and I was married. We were married for 17 years, but we separated. I left the marriage after 14 years. um, it was, and like Helga said, I did not know the signs. I had never had honestly, I had never had a conversation about it. I hadn't been exposed to domestic violence. So when it happened, I internalized it. I thought it was something I was doing wrong. And thought I could just, if I could just love her more and do this and do that, she'll change and things will change. But things only got worse.
Mm.
As far as the 7 adjectives, I'd share a lot of what Helga said. Definitely humiliating, depressing, um, frustrating, demoralizing,
Mm.
um, hopeless,
Mm.
very much so hopeless at times, isolating. Gosh, so isolating because I was isolated from my family, friends, and I wasn't telling anybody about what was going on. I don't know what number adjective I'm on, but yeah, all of that.
So those words really, so although we don't have the story of the years, I feel like those words really, they touch people. They give you a clear picture of what you went through.
Mhm.
And so thank you for kind of giving that little snippet. Reverend Sherry.
Mhm. So, you all both talked about the red flags. And so I have a question, and that question is, what number 1 and 2, maybe even your main two, should someone look for who may not know they're even in a domestic violence relationship? I'll start with you, Mr. Conway.
Uh, I would think one of the things definitely that for me is I stopped participating in things that I love to do all my
Mm.
life. I slowly but surely stopped doing certain things, stopped participating in certain things. Um, I stopped coming around, stopped, I wasn't going to church like I used to. I stopped singing I was singing in the male chorus for my church since I was 9 years old, and that was something that was, very beloved to me. But as the abuse, increased, I just stopped everything, and wasn't participating in things like I used to. And people around me just thought, oh, he's got a family now, he's married now, he's just busy,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
They didn't know that was a sign as well. So that was definitely one big thing. And then I think another thing is I think another thing is sorry, I got distracted. Um when and I don't know how to say this, a red flag for myself would be realizing that I'm compromising who I am, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense.
Mhm.
So I know relationships definitely are about compromise. It's give and take. But but that's compromising on certain decisions and compromising on certain things. But when you start to compromise like who you are,
Mhm.
like your the person that you are, and you start compromising on your own standards and values, that should be a sign to yourself like, wait, this
Mhm. Mhm.
this is going too far. But
Mhm.
I did that so much that I lost myself before I even realized I was compromising.
Wow. Wow. How about you, Helga?
So I think some of the big ones, again, Hampton and I have a lot of overlay in our perspectives here, because I think that that's what happens when you go through an experience like this,
Mhm.
that there are these common denominators. And Definitely, I think isolation is a huge one. I think making excuses why you can't do something, making excuses for an injury, or maybe why you're upset, trying to push the blame elsewhere when you know that it's really directly related to the partner that you are having conflict with. And then I think depression is another one. It's really difficult when you're in an abusive situation to not feel depression and even some kind of anxiety about what, you don't know when the next shoe is going to drop. You don't know what that's going to look like. And so this feeling of being on guard all the time and never really being able to fully relax is another sort of common theme with survivors.
Wow. When you all were enduring that, I know this is random, but when you all were enduring that, I mean, what was your stress level like?
Oh gosh.
I mean, like really bad,
Yeah.
really bad. I think the only way that I could learn to manage through, I've been away from my ex-husband for 14 years now, almost 15 years. And I still am every 3 months in court with him because he files and files and files. He just won't stop fighting. And this is the only way he can still fight. So, so the way that I have managed is by learning dissociation. It's like learning a mental disorder by definition, a mental disorder, but learning to dissociate from this circumstance and this person so that I can have joy in the rest of my life. Because otherwise the stress is just overwhelming and you can't let it consume you. There came a point years in, probably 2, 3, 4 years in, where I thought I can't be a healthy person and a healthy mom and enjoy the rest of my life if I don't find a way to build separation between this person, this monster, and me. I need to be able to still enjoy life. And so for me, it was really learning dissociation from the whole experience with him because it's still ongoing.
Wow. Hampton, what about you?
Yes. It was very stressful. I had serious issues with anxiety that played out even physically, digestively. I had issues. I had chronic neck and back pain as a result of the stress. And I would have anxiety attacks. I remember one particular moment that I actually was frozen, with anxiety when I was on my way home from the grocery store and I realized I forgot something. And I was pulled over on the side of the road and I was panicking because I couldn't figure out what to do. Because my options were go home without the item that I forgot and risk being cursed at and called names and a fight ensuing, or go back to the store, get the item, and get home later than what she thought I should have been getting home, which would have then led to being cursed at, called names, fighting, whatever else. And so I was just frozen, with panic and anxiety because I couldn't make a decision. And of course, rationally sitting on the side of the road for however long wasn't helping the situation either. But that's just the state I was in. And that wasn't, the only time that I sometimes would just be so, riddled with anxiety that it would paralyze me.
Wow. Reva, can't hear you.
You're muted.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we both are in awe of, and everyone, we've been getting messages that have been coming in, thanking you guys for your transparency. There's also someone in the audience that talked about that they were abused as a child. And so we're so thankful for your transparency, because people need to hear it. And they don't need to hear it from us to talk about, oh, this is what people go through. They really need to hear it and feel it from a survivor.
Right.
And so I want to kind of transition to share a moment that what was a defining moment for you that I need to get out? What was that defining moment for you that you knew I needed to do something and make a decision to get out? Hampton, I'll start with you. Hampton.
There are a couple things I can think of. One in particular was as a principal. I remember being at my school and dealing with other families and their children and their trauma. And I remember looking at some of my students in their situations and saying, this is my kids.
Mm.
And it hadn't manifested yet in some of my children. And definitely not in public. There's a lot of things that would manifest at home that they were pretty good about keeping themselves together out in public. But I kept just looking at my students and how things were playing out in their lives, going, oh my God, this is my children. They're going to be exhibiting these type of aggressive behaviors or depression or all these different things. And I said, I need to do something. I need to get them out of the situation. At that point, it became more about them than it was about me.
Helga?
For me, it was my kids had just turned 4, my twins, and their father decided, we were on a vacation over their birthday. He decided to use that vacation as the opportunity to return to consuming alcohol. He had been sober for 7 years and returned to drinking alcohol. And within 6 weeks, it escalated to, it was New Year's Eve, 2007. I came home with the kids from a New Year's Eve party with family, and he was completely intoxicated and threatened to kill me, and then smashed our house apart looking for his 9mm gun that he only didn't find because I moved it when he started drinking weeks earlier. And that was it for me.
Wow.
There's no safety. There's no safety when someone threatens your life.
Yeah.
There's none. He betrayed a trust,
Yeah.
and there was no going back after that. It wasn't safe for me, and it wasn't safe for the children.
Defining moments.
Mm-hmm.
Defining moments. And that is the place that people have to get to. And sometimes, unfortunately, Helga, even with safety, some people are still too afraid to take that jump. They're too.
When I got back from our vacation, right? Our vacation, which, one night he didn't come home, and I checked with the hotel security. They found him passed out on a beach in his own vomit. I knew there were problems. I actually talked to an attorney about what the divorce process was like, because I had no idea. I grew up with married parents. I had no idea what the process was like. And I didn't want divorce. I wanted things to be okay. I wanted him to not drink, and I wanted him not to abuse me, and I wanted him to be a good father. And there was all that want, but the reality was something completely different. He was escalating and escalating and escalating. And so the tipping point for me was that moment where he literally smashed the couch frame, was smashed, the Christmas decorations. He decapitated the wise men in my nativity scene was my dad's when he grew up. He was smashed everything, lamps, furniture, everything, because he was so angry. And 7 police officers came to the house, and they didn't arrest him. They let us leave. Me and the kids could leave, but it was New Year's Eve and they were a little busy. And they saw this as, just a domestic whatever on New Year's Eve. And so we could leave and go to a hotel, but no consequence for him. None.
So with that defining moment, when you finally, how was it sharing with your family members what you went through? How was that, Helga? I'll start with you.
Really, really difficult. In the immediate aftermath, I would say, my mother has always been a huge supporter and has stood by me steadfast for years through all of this nightmare. But, I had some close friends say, you don't know how expensive divorce can be, and try and work it out. And I had a godmother to my kids said, you don't break up your family over something like this. You need to stick with it, and your kids will be the ones to suffer. I have no doubt that my kids have suffered, and I don't absolve myself of blame. I chose to marry this man knowing he had problems. So, it's years ago, I did a little project. I like doing community art projects because I think that they open a pathway of communication that's easier than just talking. And this was called the Glass Book Project. We did it with Rutgers University in Newark. And we did a series of books made of glass on domestic violence. And we called the collection Changed Relationships. And it's how even when you're in a domestic violence situation and you need so much support, it's so hard to connect and feel close to the people who you normally would feel support from. I'm going to pop off for 1 second and show you one of the books because I think it will mean something.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. All right. Sorry, I'm back. So this is one of the glass books.
Oh, wow.
And the book says it's layers of glass that are all broken. And the binding is barbed wire. So no matter how you hold the book, you feel the prick and the pain. And the writing on the pages says, can you help me put together the pieces that are my life? And this is what it feels like to be a survivor of domestic violence. Because you want the help, but no matter who comes close to you, they feel the pain too. That's really what it's powerful. It's a really powerful thing.
Wow. Hampton?
So when I first, even when I finally decided to leave, I still was very much in a mode of trying to protect my wife at the time and trying to protect my children's mother. I had actually not too long before I left had gone to court and gotten awarded protection from abuse order for me and the children. And I didn't have the heart to have her served or the courage, whatever you want to call it. So I'm saying that to say that even once I left, I still wasn't really telling my truth because I was still very much concerned about, I didn't want people to think I was just trying to bash her. I didn't know how to talk about it, honestly. I really didn't. And unfortunately, not telling my story was very detrimental because other family members, including my children, their truth was the stories she told. So I never countered what she was saying. And so when I would go back to visit, even because I when I separated, it was just me. I didn't have the kids. The custody thing was a whole nother long fight. But when I would go back to visit with the kids and see the kids at their sporting events and this, that, and the other, there were people that I had been friends with, people that I had coached their children, were not speaking to me, would not acknowledge me, would look at me with an attitude because all they knew was what she had said. And so, and again, I had never countered it, and so it got to a point, it did come to a head, particularly with my children, where they confronted me. We were all in therapy. And I remember one particular evening I was in therapy and my kids were in another room in therapy, and the therapist called me into the room and said, and two of my older daughters were in therapy, in the room together, and they said, your children have some questions for you. And they asked me some very hard questions, and I had to realize, it let me realize, oh my God, they have their even though they've witnessed a lot, there was still a lot that they didn't understand, because I was always so much, really, the only thing I would ever say is, mommy loves you. She didn't mean it. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Mommy does, I was always making excuses for her, and I was never telling my side or telling my truth. And so it definitely had a huge impact on other people's perceptions of and understandings of what happened. So honestly, it hasn't been until recently, and I'm sure there are family members that if they're watching this right now, they're learning a lot because I haven't told it all.
And and that's the challenging part, because you have people who either are going to say stay, people who are not going to believe you, they're going to choose a side, and this is what people go through, men and women, and that is challenging, especially if you've been isolated, because you guys use that word. You've been isolated to a point where, I remember Hampton had shared, even with his parents, like, when you isolate yourself from your family and then you try to go back and say, it's challenging to do that. It's so challenging, especially when people tell you to stay and you're being abused, and they're not in your shoes, and people want to give you advice and don't even have a clue as to what you've gone through. And so so this is really good information and good stories for people to hear, that people are going through. So that's the other thing. People don't know that people are going through this every single day.
Right.
Every second, every minute of the day, and sometimes culture plays a role in it. I heard in China, it is really bad.
Yeah.
Really bad right now in China, and so in certain cultures, women don't have rights, and that makes it even worse, and so Reverend Sherry, did you want to?
Yeah, I just need to add a few comments to that. I was listening to both of you all talk about the isolation pretty much, and it's like you're hit two times, you're hit within you're isolating yourself in this situation. And then when you decide to come out about it, you're isolated again because folks don't, it's just doesn't seem fair. But I know that the word of God says that, we overcome by the word of our testimony, and we are like so grateful for you all this evening, for sharing your story. What helped you to hold on to your faith? Was it a Bible verse? Was it a biblical story, a song? What helped you to hold on to your faith? And faith, and what strategies or resources helped you heal your wounds? So I'm going to start with Helga.
So I think the number one thing that helped me stay so let me back up. There was a time where I felt very disconnected from church and from God. I actually, the first service I went to after I separated, the pastor came up to me afterwards because I was crying through almost the entire service. And she said to me, there's a time and a place for everything, but not during the service. And then I thought, I'm not coming back here if I can't be me, and I'm in pain. And and I felt really angry because now this one safe sanctuary that I thought I would be able to find support in, I felt disconnected from and misunderstood in some way, almost blamed, like it was bad or wrong for me to be sad. And I will say, just it was such a fight to get through the separation and divorce that there were times in my car where I would scream to God. I mean, scream in anger and upset and rage, because it was the only space I had to be alone. And I thought, why isn't God hearing me? And it just was such a struggle. What kept me close to God and my faith ultimately was seeing my children get older, and as they became teenagers, talking to them and being honest with them and validating their hurt and their pain and the trauma they experienced because of the unhealthy relationship of their parents, and the divorce, but also I think a much deeper connection to nature as my kids became more independent and I was able to spend time away from them. Because as a single mom, and Hampton probably knows this, like if you're a single parenting and your kids need you, you're there always for them. But when you finally get to a place where they're old enough and you can find space, reconnecting with nature and the trees and the animals out in the park, and that's where I started to feel God again, feeling the sunlight on my face and the peace and the calm. And so it wasn't so much in my house yet at one point, like a few years ago, but slowly that trickles in. It's all a healing process. And that's the other thing I just want to say is, healing happens with God, healing happens with friends and family. And healing also happens within. No one person has their own path to healing. And that continuum of healing can happen over many years, or it can happen in a shorter period of time. I mean, I know people who have gotten remarried in 2 years and all is good, not my fate, but it just it's I just think there's a lot to healing in art and nature and music and honesty with kids.
Yeah. Hampton?
It's interesting. It was somewhat of a catch-22 for me, in the sense that, in one sense, I had honestly just given up on God. But on the flip side, it was my faith that actually kept me in the marriage, if that makes any sense. Or my then understanding of what the Bible and the church had to say about divorce. And so while I had kind of spiritually just was spiritually dead, but yet I still felt like I owed God, that I needed to keep this vow that I made, despite not realizing that is not the life he wanted for me, and that is not the type of love that he expected for me. So, um, you know, I but there was also times, one of the things I think that did keep me going is that periodically there were signs, if you will, certain things would happen to remind me that he hadn't forgotten about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it could only be God in those situations. And it could be a stranger that would say something to me that nobody else could know. There had to be something that God put on their heart to say to me, you know. And so it was every now and then, and I guess just when I needed it, you know, that kind of thing would happen, and it would just be a reminder, like, okay, God hasn't forgotten about me, even though I'm in this darkness and in this situation. And then once I did separate, so the church that I grew up in is the church that I came back home to. That was probably the best thing ever. And they didn't know the story. They knew something happened, obviously. I'm back in Maryland. My family is still in Pittsburgh. But you know what? It was like a prodigal son situation for real. Like that, my community embraced me and took me in. And that was so huge. You know, without asking questions. They just took me in and loved on me. And that made a huge difference, along with therapy. And I will say another thing that made a huge difference was speaking at Prince George's Community College every semester for Reverend Dr. Marisha's class, because that was extremely therapeutic for me. And that was the only speaking I was doing about it for some time. The only time I was really talking about it is when I would go to this class and I would just open myself up. Class, where they would ask me some tough questions. I mean, I don't know how many times I would break down Marisha in the class, you know, because it was so raw. And when I first started doing it, I didn't have the kids. You know, I was still fighting for the kids. It was still so fresh and so raw. And here I am talking to these strangers about it, but it was very therapeutic. Now, I'd be in a funk for a few days after I would have that talk. But it was definitely a huge part of the healing process.
Wow. That's amazing. Wow. I'm stumped. I do have a few. Hold on. Hold on, Ray. I wanted to piggyback on a couple of things. I heard Helga talk about, you know, her situation at the church, and I really think that folks react like that because they don't know how to deal with certain things. I think the church is now seeing that we definitely need to stand by the word of God, but at the same time meet the needs of people, you know, and meet them where they are. And so I can relate to you and your experience with screaming at God for a situation that I dealt with in my own personal life. That's just being honest. That's being raw. And in my opinion, I really do believe that God appreciates your honesty. You know, I know that my emotion was screaming and then saying, "Oh, no disrespect, God," came back right real fast. But He appreciates your honesty, and yeah, you all are awesome, Marisha.
So the one thing that Helga said that connects to both of you is about the healing looks different on the individual. And I like the part of healing on different layers, right? So healing within yourself, healing with your relationships, maybe with your parents, maybe with your friends, also with your children. You know, there's all of these different layers that have to heal because of the trauma, you know. And it's so interesting because, it's an imprint, that is put on your subconscious in a way that it won't ever go away, right? It leaves a stain in a way. It leaves a stain in a way. However, it's so possible for that trauma to turn into something good, into something where almost in a certain regard, like I called you superheroes, and I truly believe survivors are superheroes because you have the ability, you have the courage, you have everything needed in order to help someone else. And so, although it happened, I feel as if it happened for a purpose. And that is, me and Reverend Sherry talk about this all the time. The things that we go through definitely are connected to our purpose. And so I really feel right now, both of you are walking in your purpose. You are impacting the world to help other people jump and spread their wings. And so the next question I kind of want to lead into is how do bystanders, how do family and friends, how do we help someone who might be in a domestic violence situation? Is there something that outsiders could do in order to help? Hampton, I'll start with you.
I think part of it for me was even when I was in it, I didn't recognize it for what it was. So somebody with the knowledge, somebody that did understand the signs, could have even, like, I knew it was bad and I knew I didn't like it. I didn't call it abuse until after I separated. I don't think I used that word till after I left the marriage. So there were a lot of things that were happening that had people around me had an understanding of the signs and the types of supports that were available, that would have helped me greatly. So I'm answering your question by saying making others. I think that's why the education side of it, advocacy is important, and then education is great, because if people don't know, then they don't know. And the more we educate people about what to look for, what the resources are, how to support. I mean, there was no shelter for me to take my kids to. So, that's another reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, because even in the moments where I was like, there were times where I left, but I only left for 1 or 2 days at a time and always came back. And part of that was where I'm going, right? Women's shelter wasn't going to take me, and so, I think doing the best we can to educate folks and to make sure they're aware of just the fact that there is help. There is some help. And here's where I can, and if I don't know where specifically it is, I at least know who to point you to get you to it. So as much as we can educate the folks around us, I think that'll make a big difference with, when we encounter people that are in these situations, and really be giving them some practical help, not just, oh, honey, pray about it. Not just, well, you're supposed to be submissive to your husband. The Bible says submit to your No, I'm not, none of that kind of help. I'm talking about real practical help.
Yeah.
Helga?
Yeah, I would say, again, the red flags that I think are really maybe most noticeable are the isolation, the excuses, and depression or anxiety. And if you see those red flags, have a conversation without judgment. Don't offer advice. Listen, and ask the person what they need to be safe. And then if you're unsure how to help, call the hotline, because it's not just people that are in domestic violence that use the hotline. It's people who love people who are in situations of domestic abuse that use the hotline. They will help find the resources in your community. They will help think through a safety plan. They will help to identify, other supports that you might be in need of. But there are resources out there. So, I think informing yourself, looking for the red flags, informing yourself, or asking the questions, having the conversation to learn what the person needs to feel safe, what they think they need and what they're ready for, and then using the hotline to find credible, local resources would probably be the most helpful.
And if I can co-sign one of the things that Helga said, with particularly just the no judgment part, because at the end of the day, you're the victim very often loves the person that is abusing them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't just flippantly, girl, you shouldn't be putting up with that. You have to be very intentional and conscientious about how you respond. And like she said, often just listen. And sometimes if you don't know what help to offer, just listen. Because, but yes, it can be very disheartening. I told a pastor, one of the first times I ever told anybody what's going on, I told a pastor a little bit about what was happening. And his response to me was, well, you just going to let her do that? So immediately, now, first of all, I'm already feeling like less of a man because I'm in this situation. But then for another man to look at me and say, oh, you just going to let her do that, just reinforced what I was already feeling. And I didn't know how to respond to that. I didn't know how to take that. It's just like, wow, okay. So, and that type of thing, that wasn't helpful at all.
And I same thing with me. I had so many people say, you knew who he was before you married him.
Yeah.
Okay. So as if the blame is mine because I married this person who I knew had issues before I married him. Right.
But you know what? We all have hope. We all believe. Oftentimes we see potential in people, and we believe that one day that potential is going to evolve. You know what I mean? So even if even if we see red flags, we still believe that there is good in them. We still have hope that it will get better. You know what I mean? And so unfortunately, we do that as people anyway. Unfortunately, that is a downfall. I believe we are so judgmental, and you can never know what somebody in their shoes. You just never know what you would do. You just don't know. It's always easy to see from the outside, but when you in the hot seat, you don't know what you would do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everybody's story is different. Everybody's story is different. What I can handle may not be what Marisha can handle, or vice versa. And we need to stop as a people being judgmental and try to look through other people's lenses, because we definitely don't know what folks are going through.
The other thing I want to say is that, we have this cultural belief that when you're in love and in a loving relationship, that there's healing. And so, I think that some people get into relationships believing that love heals and that the healing will continue. But in some situations, you can't change the nature of someone that has real anger issues and issues of abuse. No love can really heal that, I think. maybe God's love. Human
Yeah.
love, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hampton, you want to say something because you over there shaking your head.
Listen, I remember reading I remember a point in my marriage where I read 1 Corinthians 13 every day. Like every day I read 1 Corinthians 13. And I said, because I was in the mindset of love never fails, right? Isn't that how it ends? And how the chapter ends? Love never fails. So if I just keep loving her, and if I keep doing this, and if I keep being patient, if I keep being kind, if I forget all right, I'm going down verse by verse by verse. If I do this, but of course, both people have to be doing those things, right?
Right.
And so, it was very much one-sided, but that was something I held on to, and I thought I could love her into change. And that doesn't work. That's not my job. I had to come to the realization that, like, people can't change people. We can be catalysts for change. We can inspire change. We can motivate change. But the real change, only God can do that. And I'm not God, so I had to let that go eventually.
Yeah. And sometimes folks' issues, I know, do not appear until years into a relationship, and that may be caused by a shift in life. We just don't know. Yeah. Wow. I have another question for you guys. How would you encourage women and men to break the silence without the stigma of feeling like a failure? Hampton?
You're not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, and so again, that's kind of what motivates me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know there are other people. I know there are other men that are in this place, and I feel like if I can muster up enough courage to say, hey, you're not the only one. It's not just you. That maybe that will give them enough courage to actually be able to say, okay. And it has happened. I mean, I've experienced it. I've experienced being in a setting where, because I actually spoke up and talked about, at the end of that setting, a man would pull me aside and be like, hey man, I ain't never told anybody this, but that has happened on numerous occasions. And they only said something because they saw this other man standing up there saying something. So for me, that was powerful. And so that's, a huge part of it. And for women too, like, for women to hear other women or other people saying, this happened to me. This is how I dealt with it. This is the mistakes I even made. This is how long I stayed, and I stayed too long. Hearing, for another woman to hear all of the things, and especially to see somebody that's out of it, right? Somebody that's out of it, but saying, hey, I was where you were. I think that's very powerful. And so the more we can do that, I think the more it will help others.
Yeah. Helga?
Similarly, I would say stick with survivors. Survivors know what it's like. They've lived it. If you can talk to someone who's been out of an abusive situation for a few years, there's a lot of hope that you can feel from hearing someone's story of survival and just kind of sustaining through those dark times. But when it comes to stigma, I'm also a strong believer that labels serve no good purpose unless it's for insurance reimbursement. And, it's like, I know there are a lot of people that are uncomfortable with labeling their experience as domestic violence or domestic abuse or child abuse. And I think if we can use something a bit less legal, it's an unhealthy relationship. We
Mhm.
all have had unhealthy relationships.
Mhm.
So if we can call it an unhealthy relationship and one that we're healing from, there's no, it feels, at least to me, it feels like there's no stigma in that, because everyone has an unhealthy relationship at some point, but not everyone would describe um, their situation as domestic abuse or domestic violence.
Mhm.
Oh, I love that. Remove the labels. That right there is extremely powerful. Remove the labels and just call it what it is. It's almost like sin is sin, no matter
Right. Right.
what we do, right?
Right.
That's what it is. And then no matter what, it's an unhealthy relationship,
Mhm.
right? And so that was extremely powerful. And when you were talking about you talked about domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse. It's really interesting. My husband just told me that one of the reasons why DCPS right now is pushing very hard for schools to open is because sexual abuse and child abuse is on the rise in DC.
Mhm.
So in order to keep children safe, they're safer in school than being home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is unfortunately, and I'm pretty sure it's not just in DC, right? It is, it's just going on everywhere. And so unfortunately, young people, children are being exposed to different things just because they're being home with unhealthy parents, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, and they can be online with a teacher, and the teacher can say, "Hey, how are things going?" Maybe the teacher knew the student before this school year and knew that there were issues or concerns. But if mom or dad is sitting on the other side of the room, what's the likelihood that they're going to open up? It's very unlikely. And we also, in the DC area at least, we're seeing an increase in unexplained injuries among children at emergency rooms. So, these are also big red flags that things, it's being locked up with, in lockdown, with an abuser in your home is a child's worst nightmare, really. And then not having the relationships, their friends,
Yeah.
not having time with their friends to really decompress and laugh. It's really, for as concerned as we all are about the virus and reopening schools, I think that, even outdoor learning, like there has to be a way for kids to come back together and have some kind of normalcy, because it's the abuse and neglect that they may be experiencing is one thing, but the impact on their development and their socialization, and especially if that's compounded with traumatic abuse at home, those kids are going to have a really rough time. It's
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
it's really sad. It's sad. It's disheartening. Um, and the only thing we can do is just pray.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do. And so I know that out of all of the different things that you've gone through this process, and I know both of you guys' stories. And I know both of you have about maybe a dissertation as it relates to this. I know you have a dissertation, but tell me, give me a snippet, give us a snippet, because I want people to hear this. Give us a snippet of your biggest challenge as it relates to the legal system. Again, give me a snippet. Look, I know Helga's side, I know Hampton's side. So I know I know, like I said, you have a dissertation. I already know. Both of you have a dissertation. Both of you right now could buy me, a nice $3 million home right now. However, give us a snippet of the challenges you face, because this is the other piece too. It's not, I know me and Helga was talking about this the other day. You deal with the abuse from the abuser, but then you have this other form of abuse in the legal system. And so I'll start with Helga.
Oh boy. I start with an exhale. It's a good place. Um, I would say probably the biggest challenge was realizing that our legal system was going to um, look at the the father of our children and compare him to me as an apples to apples comparison. And so when I first went to the court and I said, if there's going to be visitation, can there please be random drug and alcohol testing? And they said, yes, but you have to agree to it too. So I said, fine, no problem. Well, can you imagine? Okay. And I was a trauma survivor when I got into this marriage. The very first time I got a call for a random test, I went to the clinic and I had no idea what it was like. They marched me up the stairs of this townhome of a screening facility. They opened the bathroom door, left the bathroom door open. Person stood there watching me, gave me a cup and said, give me a urine sample. And you may not close the door. I need to watch because I need to watch. How on earth that was okay on any level is beyond comprehension to me. And it was another trauma for me. So I wanted my kids just to be safe. And then I had to go through this whole experience because I wanted there to be some safeties in place so that I knew my kids were safe when they were having visits with him. The courts also have appointed professionals, best interest attorney, parenting coordinator, custody evaluators. All of these people get hundreds of dollars per hour. They're all chosen by the court and ordered by the court in a court order. So you have to hire these professionals to do these things. Our parenting coordinator felt like it was okay for my ex-husband to scream at me in parenting coordination because he needed to let out his feelings. So I had to sit there and receive additional abuse, and I'm paying for it because the court ordered it. On top of that, there are no regulations. In the state of Maryland, we do have something, what is it called again? A gatekeeper order. So what I experienced in my case was nothing short of litigation abuse to an extreme level. At one point, my ex-husband filed the same exact motion in Frederick County and Montgomery County, the same exact one, two different jurisdictions. So I had to litigate both of them. And he also filed a civil suit against me to the tune of $28 million for damages because the divorce was difficult for him. I had to lawyer up to resolve these things. And I went to, the case is in Frederick County, Maryland. I went to the court and I begged them for a gatekeeper order because after 12 years of nonstop litigation, I said, can you please look at this history of filing over and over and over again, the same thing with the same result. The kids, I still have custody of the kids, the same result, but he keeps filing and filing and filing. And they denied my motion for a gatekeeper order. But at this point, I self-litigate. I'm pro se. I'm not an attorney, but I play one in Frederick County Circuit Court. And at least I learned enough over a decade or more of litigation to be able to manage it myself. But to the detriment, the financial exhaustion of this nonstop litigation. I still owe one attorney. I just paid one off for the $28 million lawsuit. Was paying off $250 a month for years. I still have another one that I owe over $150,000 to keep my kids safe. That's our system. That's why I won't stop until the system changes. It has to change.
Hampton.
Yeah. I started off so once I separated, I started the proceedings for custody. However, in the meantime, the kids were still being abused. I had left the state, which was a whole nother, I left the state, couldn't take the kids with me, but I got myself healing and started fighting for the kids. And that was constantly going back and forth to the court to try to get protection from abuse orders for the children and getting denied. Even after, so, it was a situation for years in our home. What happened in our home stayed in our home. The kids did not tell anybody about what was going on. But when the courts got involved and police got involved and Child Protective Services got involved, I had to convince my kids to tell the truth. Like, I had to work very hard to say, hey, if anybody asks you about what's going on, I didn't coach them. I just said, tell them the truth. It's okay to talk to a judge. It's okay to talk to a counselor. It's okay to tell them the truth. So, fortunately, I think at the time, the 4 oldest were the ones that the judge wanted to interview specifically. And they told the truth. And after they did that, the judge came back around and sent the kids back home with their mother. And the kids are looking at me like, they're sitting in the courtroom looking at me when the judge gave the decision. They just looked at me like, Dad, what the heck? Because now we basically, in their minds, we just snitched on Mom and we're going back with Mom. So that happened, I think, 3 times. Even the judge going against her own word. Because the first time she gave the kids back, she gave the kids back with a warning saying, hey, if this ever happens again, then I'm automatically going to give your husband the permanent protection from abuse order. Well, it happened again, and the judge reneged on her own decision and sent the kids back with their mom. And so, this went on for some time. And finally, of course, like Helga said, the first time I got denied a protection from abuse order, I walked out of the courthouse and walked into a law firm that was right around the corner. And was like, obviously, I'm not going to be able to do this on my own because this is crazy to me. So I hired an attorney who I'm still paying for today. Yeah, it was just one thing after another. Child Protective Services. And so going back to Helga's point, it makes you wonder what kind of training these folks actually get, because all the people that I was depending on to protect my children failed my children. The police, when they were involved, the judges actually, Child Protective Services, all of them failed my children. And it's like, you were talking about being hopeless at some point, just because it's like, these are the people, like, and at this point I'm like, forget me. I wasn't even dealing with divorce. Divorce wasn't even an issue for me at the time. I just wanted to get my kids safe. And I'm like, forget me. This isn't about me. Just get my kids safe. Talk to the kids. Work in favor of my kids. And, at every turn, it failed. And so what's interesting is the child psychologist, the thing that really kind of, I think, turned the tide was the psychologist, the corner-pointed child psychologist. We had to meet with her as a family, and she interviewed the kids individually. But once the judge could not make a decision or would not make a decision, she sent us back to the child psychologist again. Because the child psychologist, when she did her write-up, she went right down the middle. She didn't want to make a decision one way or the other either. And so it was like everybody was playing hot potato with my family. Child Protective Services didn't want to make a decision. They tossed it to the judge tossed it to the child psychologist. Like, nobody wanted to make a decision. And so the judge sends us back to the child psychologist and tells the child psychologist, you can't go down the middle. You got to make a decision or a recommendation. Because ultimately it's the judge's decision, but the child psychologist has to say, you got to make a recommendation. So the second time we go back to the child psychologist, this time she does an assessment on my 4 or 5 oldest kids. She didn't do this the first time. But this time she does an assessment. Again, of course, we're paying her for this again, too, by the way. Like Helga said, every time you do this, you're paying for it. And matter of fact, I had to pay for it because I was the one with the income. She does this assessment, and the assessment reveals that the kids have depression and anxiety that's related to victims of abuse. And the wording was something like that. And so at this point, the judges couldn't deny these findings. But in my mind, I'm like, why didn't you do this assessment the first time I paid you? Like, here we are coming back around to you only because the judge forced us to come back to you. And now you've got these findings that you could have got the first time. But anyway, long story short, a lot of money later, a lot of time, a lot of exhaustion. I did get, primary custody of the children. But
and how many children is that, sir?
The 10 children.
Yes. Super dad. Only married one time, ladies and gentlemen. Only married one time. Let me put that little.
Yes.
Out.
That
only one baby mama. Only one.
Yes. Thank you for clearing that up.
No, I had to, people could have came in midway, so I had to clean it up. So okay, again, our justice system is another barrier. It's another barrier to people getting the help that they need. And unfortunately, it hurts the children. It hurts the children. And so let me, I know we have about 10 minutes left. So let me just briefly, what did you do to help the children through this? Or what are you still doing to help the children through this? Because that's also key, because a lot of domestic violence deals with, children are involved. And so what did you use in order to help? Hampton, I'll start with you.
We immediately started therapy as soon as I got custody. The whole family. My daughter, my oldest child, wasn't here very long because she ended up graduating high school and going away. My oldest son actually had just gotten admitted to a private boarding school, gotten a scholarship to a private boarding school, and I got custody. So those two didn't get as much therapy, or if any. But the rest of the 8, we were in therapy right away. And that made a big difference. But I think, aside from the therapy, I think the biggest thing we had to work on was just changing the culture of our home. Mm-hmm. And changing the culture of how we interacted with each other. There were a lot of things that we all had to unlearn. Mm-hmm. We all had to unlearn a lot. We'd all developed certain behavior. We all were liars, including myself. Me and the kids were all naturally, instinctively liars, because the culture was such in the home before that, you would pay capital punishment for just doing a normal childhood thing. If you spilled the milk, if you forgot to put something away, those things came with so much punishment and abuse that when you were confronted with something, your natural instinct would be to lie about it just as a protective measure. I was the same way. Okay. And so, that was something, that's just an example of one of the things we had to unlearn. Like, I had to convince my kids that it was okay to make a mistake, and that you're not going to get yelled at or persecuted just for making a mistake. So understanding, the habits that had been formed, and really working on unlearning those and creating an environment for them that they felt like they could be themselves and not be on edge. They were just, it took some time, obviously. But, I even have kids now, they didn't understand why I got to go to therapy and what's this for. But I have certain children now that will say to me, I have a couple that are still in therapy consistently, but they've come to me and said, "Hey, Dad, can you set me up an appointment with Miss So-and-so?" Like, some of them have gotten to that point because, we've kind of built this culture of this is how we heal. this is how we get better. This is how we help each other.
That's
You
good.
know, and so that's been a huge piece.
Helga?
Well, therapy, I think, is definitely helpful for the whole family. I would say as my kids became teenagers, just having the honest, open conversation with them, validating what they were feeling, how it traumatized them, how it affected them and still does affect them. And then, probably most importantly, asking them for their forgiveness. Because, I wasn't the perpetrator, but I played a role in the unrest in their lives. And I'm really sorry, profoundly sorry for that and how it's affected them. But I think it's really important to be honest and open, especially when the kids are old enough to have the conversation. They want to understand, and they don't always know who to believe or what to believe. But they come to a place to find their own truth, by asking questions and having those open conversations.
Wow. And so it's so important because kids have feelings too, right? And they are little adults, and we have to I love that word, honesty. We have to be honest. And so Hampton, kind of shared where, because he wasn't disclosing, but then in the same regard, because he wasn't disclosing, it hurt in the long run. You know what I mean? And so being open, having that dialogue with young people on a level that they can handle it, because every age would be different, right? So age appropriate, and even having a counselor to kind of help guide that as well. But it's just so necessary because they need to heal as well, right? Because we want them to grow up. We want them to get married. We want them to have healthy relationships. You know what I mean? And so I applaud both of you for doing that. And so, Sherry, as we are about to end, any last reflections?
As you mentioned earlier, these are superheroes, right? And their superpower is their voice. And as we see, even in this time that we're in, voting and all that kind of stuff, our power is our voice, right? And so if we don't use our voices, things can't change. So I just appreciate you all. I know you all is still in it, still in the fight, and thank you for that. You encouraged a lot of people today to stay in the fight, keep doing it until a change comes. Grateful to have you on the show today, and grateful to have met you and to know you.
And so I'm going to say, audience, you are witnessing some superheroes who have survived. And like I started out in the beginning, the devil tried it, but they are still here. And so their stories may mirror things that you may be going through right now, but I want you to know there is always help and there's always hope. So my prayer is that God will give you the wings to be able to fly and be free. Yeah. And as me and Reverend Sherry, there's a song that we like, just jump and watch your wings grow. Because you definitely can survive just like they have. They are survivors, and you can survive as well. So again, I want to thank both of you for coming on. This has been an awesome series this afternoon. And I appreciate your stories. I appreciate your legacy. And like Reverend Sherry said, do not stop the fight. Yes. So thank you again. This is the I Am series. We have had a great time tonight. We thank you for hanging in there with us. definitely stay tuned for next month, last Friday of the month, where we'll be doing some Christmas decorations. And so we're excited about that. So stay tuned. We love you. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
That was great. Oh, Helga left.
Helga left.
Oh, wow. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was. It was.
It
How
still
you
says
feeling?
live in the corner. It still says live in the corner. We still live?
I clicked in.